recorded on location at my sister's house in Fresno, California. This is Benjamin Boyce. And continuing with the Laurier soiree, I want to read an open letter sent specifically by the communications faculty at Wilfrid Laurier University on December 18th, 2017, prior to the official statement given by President McClatchy, which basically exonerates Lindsay Shepherd and then says that the three people, Rambukkana, Pimlott, and Joel, who cornered her and did that whole interrogation of her, those people had proceeded in bad faith. Basically, we're not operating under any official procedure of the gendered violence policy or any other policy, plus the complaint that was made was not actually a complaint, but rather something that one of those teachers overheard. So this letter is from the communications faculty and was delivered before that official statement by the college. December 18th, 2017. An open letter to our academic colleagues. We are writing in response to the ongoing situation involving teaching assistant Lindsay Shepherd and our colleagues Drs. Nathan Rambukkana, Herbert Pimlott in the Department of Communication Studies at Wilfrid Laurier University. We are writing to share our perspective, clarify some information, and support our departmental colleagues and students. A meeting with Shepherd, who is a student in the Cultural Analysis and Social Theory, or CAST, MA program, and was assigned a teaching assistantship in communication studies as part of her MA funding, was secretly recorded and sent to the media by the TA. This act sparked columns and op-eds that rushed to assess the meeting, generalizing from this single event a diagnosis of our program, the university, and the state of higher education in Canada. We welcome the widening range of perspectives on this situation that are beginning to emerge in the public sphere. Now hold that in mind. They welcome the widening range of perspectives. We recognize that the meeting was mishandled. We specifically acknowledge the power imbalance in the meeting. It's very telling that their one criticism of it is a power imbalance, as Dr. Rambukkana acknowledged in his open letter to his TA. In future meetings where serious matters pertaining to the conduct of TAs are under discussion, we acknowledge that students should be encouraged to bring someone representing them and their interests. This language is interesting. In future meetings where serious matters pertaining to the conduct of TAs are under discussion. It's very subtle, but there's something about that gets my spidey senses tingling. We would support a graduate student initiative to unionize TAs, which could provide student employees with a grievance process and other forms of support in cases such as this one. Rather than her going to the media, she has official channels, which would cut off her access to going public, because she would have to follow these procedures. So they have a way to slow down or stop a rogue TA from getting out of control. As we understand it, Dr. Rambukkana did not operate unilaterally when he called a meeting with his TA. Rather, we believe he acted in response to a disclosure made by one or more students to university offices set up to provide confidential student support. What we hear now is that he acted from overhearing a discussion. It's still murky exactly how officials or teachers got a hold of the information that Lindsay had shown this clip, and whether people were complaining about it or not, or if the discussion just came up that somebody dared to show a Jordan Peterson clip in one of Dr. Rambukkana's classes, which cast a bad light on Rambukkana if he didn't take action. Who knows? This is all speculation. Upon being notified of this disclosure, Dr. Rambukkana, as course instructor, understood that he had a responsibility to act in line with university policies, including those laid out in the gender and sexual violence policy. Now, he's been reprimanded, at least publicly, officially, he's been reprimanded for not acting in line with these policies. Shepherd is a master's student in the CAST program who was assigned a teaching assistantship in communication studies as part of her MA funding. These are communication studies professors, so it's very intentional that they reiterate this line. Because the communication studies program is large, the program is sometimes assigned TAs from outside its graduate program. The student in this case is one of 6 teaching assistants and 2 instructional assistants who are collectively responsible for 14 tutorials for 350 students registered in CS 101, Canadian Communications, in context. They love this word. This is a very important word for them, context. In the context of a large course like this, it is necessary to strive for consistency across tutorials. Consistency across tutorials. What does that mean? When TAs work outside their home department, we see the need to work toward more integrated TA training. What does this mean exactly? Consistency. Integrated. What do these words mean? Plans to augment existing TA training need to consider the constraints of TA contract hours within which we operate. While the free speech, quote-unquote, free speech of a single individual has dominated discussion surrounding this situation, quote-unquote, academic freedom is also a decisive term in this context. Dr. Rambukkana exercises academic freedom as a course supervisor by setting parameters for the multiple tutorials that supplement his lecture. It is within the scope of a supervising professor's academic freedom to have workplace meetings with TAs regarding how course material is taught. CS 101 is a mandatory course for majors in communication studies, and it sets foundations for the rest of the program's undergraduate curriculum. CS 110 tutorials largely operate as workshops that address writing, grammar, and research skills. We maintain that the use of materials that invite controversy into the classroom needs to be approached with pedagogical care and forethought. Public debates about freedom of expression, while valuable, love that they're giving out that bone, can have a silencing effect on the free speech of other members of the public. This is an interesting argument. This is kind of why I want to bring up this essay, because this is being reiterated over and over and over again, that yeah, free speech is important, but we need to think about the free speech of these other people who are silenced by free speech. Is the free speech of some people silencing the free speech of others? So it still kind of seems like a free speech argument that's kind of against free speech in a certain way. We uphold the rights of trans, non-binary, and queer folk to be addressed in our classrooms in ways that they define. So that second sentence there, that basically goes back to this contextualization that we've heard so much about at Laurier. And what I want to offer to our discourse, our common discourse, is that whenever anybody appeals to contextualization, what they're trying to do is minimize the game or the argument that's being spoken about by placing it in a larger game. But when they make the appeal to contextualization, what they need to do immediately in order for this appeal to be taken seriously is to define the terms of the greater game that they're making out. And then we examine, the argument goes on to examining those rules to see if they are fair. Within this, what they're doing is that, quote, we uphold the rights of trans, non-binary, and queer folk to be addressed in our classrooms in ways that they define. Right? So these people should have the privilege to define the rules of the context, because otherwise they, by their inability to define these rules, are therefore already silenced by other rules. Public debates about freedom of expression, while valuable, can have a silencing effect on the free speech of other members of the public. We uphold the rights of trans, non-binary, and queer folk to be addressed in our classrooms in ways that they define. Those in positions of authority in the classroom, faculty, instructors, teaching assistants, are not sitting equally around the table with students. Instead, they have a responsibility to foster an environment of mutual respect and critical thinking, one wherein students should never feel that either their grades or their well-being could be impacted because of their gender, sexuality, race, class, or any other facet of their identity. Now, The problem that I have with that is that how do you define well-being? Within this whole social justice sort of paradigm, being disagreed with can trigger your PTSD or your PTSD-like symptoms. Therefore, your well-being is threatened by not being catered to. Therefore, you need to be given the ability to define the terms of context. You need to be given the control over the discourse. Your rights as an individual trump the rights of the other individual to speak about you in a way that you disagree with or that interferes with your well-being. That's the underlying argument that I see being made. We appreciate that our university has mechanisms through which students who feel unsafe, unfairly treated, or who have experienced intolerance in the classroom or otherwise in their role as student can make appeals and find support and resources to help them. We also acknowledge that we can do a better job in making students aware of these mechanisms. We are always so grateful when students do approach campus offices designed for reporting problematic classroom situations, as their courage makes us do our jobs better. Now let's pause here. We are always so grateful when students do approach campus offices designed for reporting
problematic classroom situations.
Basically, they are admitting that there are campus offices, the offices of diversity, of inclusion, of equity, and all these various different subgroups under the diversity and equity offices are designed for reporting problematic classroom situations. Or, in other words, policing free speech, policing argument, policing behavior. What I see being admitted to right here is that these offices of diversity and equity, and then all the sub-offices that partake in various identity groups, these offices are not about finding a place to come together and find communion with people of like situations with you. They're no longer for that primarily. They're primarily for taking this identitarian politic and exerting its influence over the various other activities of the college. And how do I know that? Because they're about reporting problematic classroom situations. And what are those problematic classroom situations? They're situations that fail to uphold the rights of trans, non-binary, and queer folk to be addressed in our classrooms in the ways that they define. We are always so grateful when students do approach campus offices designed for reporting problematic classroom situations, as their courage makes us do our jobs better. We thank you for coming forward. You are such valued members of our community. Now, this refrain right here, I see time and time again with these open letters, is that there's a group that these professors or these faculty members are representing, and they're always cheering along they're cheering along the underdog, and that supports their whole argument. That supports the compassionate backbone, if we can call it that, of their entire thrust to impose their views on the operation of the entire campus, and furthermore, to cast the debate of free speech into their terms of not freedom of thought so much as freedom from harm. To continue. Charges that our program shelters students from real-world issues or fosters classrooms inhospitable to discussing contentious issues from different vantage points seem to us simply preposterous. This is said directly after they just stated that they want to have certain identity groups being able to define the rules of contest in debate. So it's preposterous that they think this is preposterous. And it's not actually preposterous. This is a rhetorical maneuver. These are a bunch of communication professors, which basically means these are a bunch of rhetors. Which I'm not going to say they're a bunch of sophists, but we'll see. Because I think that they're operating entirely under the rubric of power operations. Courses taught by Drs. Rambukkana and Pimlott and many other professors in our department and across the university directly confront societal issues ranging from poverty to the global economy, sexuality, racism, and beyond. All right. What does that actually mean? Courses taught by Drs. Rambukkana and Pimlott directly confront societal issues ranging from poverty to the global economy, sexuality, racism, and beyond. They're not actually saying that they're they're confronting various views of that, or that they're dealing with various views. It says that they're directly confronting societal issues. And we know by looking through a lot of the papers that a lot of these people are writing, it's all about critical theory, which is basically that there's this normalized, hegemonic the system of society, and we need to undermine all these systems of oppression, as we see with Pimlott, and as we see with Rambukkana, and as we see with the director of the Diversity and Equity offices.
So reverse discrimination, if we understand how racism, sexism, transphobia, etc., how it operates systemically. So it's happening within the system, as opposed to just happening on the individual level. You'll see that, but the reality is that the root cause of racism, etc., are systems of power and privilege. And so when somebody says that there's reverse discrimination or reverse racism, it's often impossible, because the person who they're claiming is enacting racism doesn't have the power within the system to do that. Okay. And so because it's about power and privilege, it's not just about me treating you a particular way. It's that when you treat me in this way, a whole system supports it.
Likewise, commentators who characterize our students as millennial snowflakes, which I've never done, not only insult our students, but also paint a dramatically inaccurate representation of what happens in our classrooms, where students participate in facilitated, respectful, and rigorous critical and scholarly discussion regularly. Commentary on this event in the press and social media has emboldened individuals who see themselves as noble defenders of free speech to intimidate our faculty and students, to the point that protective measures have been taken in an attempt to secure their safety. Now, again, there's these claims that people are being harmed, and yet, where's the proof that people's safety is at risk? Just because security has been lifted up higher doesn't mean we have any proof that actually there's need for more security. Against this politics of revenge, they don't define this, right? Politics of revenge. They're basically saying that if you're supporting free speech and criticizing us, then you're out for revenge. Is that what they're actually saying? Against this politics of revenge, we acknowledge the moral imperative to support and protect our colleagues and students. We urge our colleagues at Laurier and beyond to monitor carefully how this event has been framed and taken up. By monitor carefully, do you mean to assess it in a certain way? To see it as politics of revenge? To undermine your opponents as free speech defenders who are emboldened to call people mean names like snowflake and so on? What do you mean by monitor carefully? We agree with Laurier's president that we live in an increasingly polarized world. I think that they're actually adding flame to the fire by calling their opponents working out of revenge. Anyways, we agree with Laurier's president that we live in an increasingly polarized world, understanding the forces and discontent driving this polarization, including how they are at play in this situation and with what consequences is a collective task in which we have a stake. Undersigned faculty members and affiliate faculty in the Department of Communication Studies. And then a bunch of names I don't want to read. So again, we have people framing the argument as free speech versus something else. And I don't think that they are necessarily understanding what I would say that actually I think they should be very strong defenders of free speech and say that, yeah, okay, let's use our free speech to explain our side of the story. But the thing is that they're missing the point that this is only nominally about transgender issues. This is primarily about how Pimlott, Rambukkana, and Joel abused their authority to contextualize or try to contextualize Jordan Peterson, to cast certain arguments in a negative light. And then what these people do is exactly that. They frame it as this false narrative about free speech and stuff, and then they say, actually, everybody who's talking about free speech is missing the real issue. It's that we need to be able to contextualize the game. we have a moral imperative to define the terms of argument. And these terms can be rigorous, respectful, facilitated, and so on, and yet they're continuing forward with their critical view of the world, with their critical race view of the world. They want to cast freedom of speech as an oppressive tool against those oppressed classes that they're trying to support.